Hello artists, and welcome to day 83 of the epic journey. I'm Dalene FM, and today I'm going to be discussing the palette knife portrait. So if you saw my video yesterday, you would have seen that day 83 was an absolute bust. I had spent a couple of hours doing this painting and ended up losing all my footage because the little card that came out of the camera ended up getting corrupted, and it ended up having to be formatted today. Even an IT specialist tried to help me retrieve the footage and couldn't. So unfortunately I'm unable to bring you this process. Now I get the sweetest message from a lady named Kitty in Australia today, and Kitty sends me a message saying that I must take solace in the fact that not every painting that I do, well, that every artist does, will be a success first time around. And she's quite right, absolutely right. Kitty also said that I was still looking a bit sick because, as you know, I had bronchitis a little while ago. But the truth is, Kitty, I was really devastated at the fact that I had lost all my footage. I was deflated, and I spent most of the day today being quite deflated. Got terribly excited when the IT specialist found the files on the memory card for me, was able to retrieve them, but they were unplayable, so I got all deflated all over again. Anyway, I'm over it now. It was a speed hump. So I decided that I would have a chat with you today, and you know, the truth of the matter is I don't necessarily view this painting as a failure per se. Yes, I agree, it's nowhere near the kind of quality that I'm used to producing or that can be produced. But I did do a bit of research today after having done this, because I thought, you know, there must be artists out there that specialize in palette knife portraits. So I went looking for some, and in fact found they're a little bit thin on the ground, but I did find some. But it was a couple of things that this painting and the subsequent research that I did today has actually taught me. So it's a really valuable lesson. Yes, this is not going to be winning any exhibitions. In fact, I won't be entering it into any exhibitions. But And you know, like I said yesterday, the jury's still out as to whether or not I like it, but I don't hate it. I don't think it's an abject failure. I don't look at it and cringe because I could do better. I think what I learned more than anything else, if I was going to concentrate on palette knife portraiture, then I would certainly have to work on bigger canvases. And in fact, when I was doing these research today, most of the artists that I did find were working on massive canvases, and that makes a lot of sense because it's a bit like trying to do a small painting with a big paintbrush. It does make a lot of sense to work on very big canvases because you can get into all the nooks and crannies of a person's face. And in fact, that also holds true for a lot of superrealism. Most superrealistic artists will work on large canvases. It's much easier to get the detail in because there's much more space. So yes, I certainly, in terms of a palette knife canvas, this would have been far too small. Although I do usually work on large canvases, I've been concentrating on small canvases for the epic journey simply because of the amount of time that it takes. I'd rather not have, you know, spend weeks and weeks on a painting or days and days on a painting. I'd rather do a painting just over a couple of days so that lessons are not necessarily stretched out over a very long period of time. It's like sitting watching paint dry, literally. The other thing that I did learn with this is that the palette knife that I was using, of the two, I used two palette knives, one very long one and one very small one, or very short one. The little one that I was using, I think didn't have enough flick. You know, when I was chatting to you about palette knife techniques, I talked about the importance of a palette knife that had a lot of a lot of spring in the steel. And I think the smaller of the two palette knives that I was using didn't have enough spring for this, because I found myself wanting to sort of get more flexibility in the palette knife to get into the nooks and crannies of the eyes and of the nostrils, you know, the little places. And so that was one thing that I definitely would invest in if I was doing a lot of palette knife portraiture, is a very soft, flexible palette knife. So for those of you who are quite keen to do palette knife portraiture, keep that in mind. Go on big canvases and use a very flexible palette knife. I think it would make the job a lot easier. Another thing that I decided was that some of the paint was a little bit soft. I was using the paint straight out of the tube, which is usually good, and in the case of colors like Van Dyke Brown, which a lot of the hairy part and some of the shadows have got a lot of Van Dyke Brown in them, it's actually a really nice paint to use straight out of the tube because it's a very thick pigment. In the case of colors like Viridian Green or Alizarin Crimson, they're very, very soft paints, even straight out of the tube. So I found that a little bit difficult because in the eyes, for example, there's quite a lot of Viridian Green in there, and I found I was struggling to get the paint to be thick enough. So again, if I was going to do this on a regular basis, I would invest in a really good impasto paste. Now I do have an impasto paste, but I don't particularly like it. It's very thick and it's like gluey almost, so it's not a particularly nice one. So if I was going to do this on a regular basis, I would make sure that I invested in a really, really good impasto medium. So it's all very much a learning curve, and I don't, like I said, I don't hate this painting. I'm not terribly disappointed with the way that it worked out. In fact, I think that some of the shadow under the hair and the light coming onto the nose particularly, I was quite pleased with how that worked out. The nose was very difficult to get. I think the eyes were the most difficult, and I think that I could have done a better job on the eyes because I also worked from the bottom up, so maybe when I got to the eyes I was a little bit tired. But I'm very pleased with the job that I did on the nose. I think I managed to get the nose to look full and not illustrated as such. I was pleased with how the colors worked out. You know, with palette knife work, one has to almost mix even the nuances of colors, as opposed to brushwork where you can use your brush on your canvas to take two colors and blend them together to get your third. In the case of palette knife work, it's not quite as easy, so I did mix quite a few colors to get the in-between nuances of colors. But I was quite pleased with how the colors themselves worked out here, and the blending around the cheek area and across the forehead. I wasn't terribly disappointed with that either. In this area here, the eyebrow, I think that highlight on the lid of her eye I managed to get quite nicely, and the sun streaming through her hair and catching the side of her nose, I was quite pleased with that. There are parts of the painting that I didn't like. The hair didn't work out as well as what I'd like it to have worked out. So all in all, as an experiment, I think it was quite successful. And like I said, you know, when I did my research today looking for other artists who worked in palette knife specifically for portraiture, I did feel that of the artists that I looked at, and there was quite a few of them, and I spent quite a lot of time browsing through the work that they were producing, I did feel that this painting compared quite favorably, and that I had started to do something that if I had the desire to spend more time on it and to really practice it, that it could actually work out quite well. So I think palette knife portraiture is a very viable reality for somebody who enjoys palette knife work, and I know that there are artists out there. I'm thinking of you, Kerry, specifically in the UK. I know you like to do paintings really, really quickly, and this actually is a good way of doing quick paintings. It's fun. Palette knife is always fun work to do. It's exciting in the sense that you kind of lose a little bit of control, so it's really nice to almost give over and submit to what your painting is going to come out like. I find that quite exciting, and I think because of the speed at which it goes, for artists that are impatient, in inverted commas, that don't want to spend days and weeks on a portrait in the classical style or even in our modern impasto type painting, this is a really viable option with a bit of practice, getting your paint thicknesses right, and certainly getting the right palette knife in terms of the sprung steel. I think this could be something that would work out. So artists, the whole aim of this exercise was to do something that I'd never done before. I do that every now and again. It's fun to play with something that you've never done before. It pushes your personal boundaries to help you to see what else you're capable of doing, and that's how your art evolves and grows and develops over time. So I think the biggest message that came out of this, besides the techniques and the little technical things that I could have done to do a better painting, I think the message that I probably reinforced in myself more than anything else is the real need to extend oneself beyond one's normal boundaries. I think it's a good thing. So in terms of how it came out as a painting, it's alright. In terms of being a palette knife painting, I'm not disappointed with it. And will I keep doing it? Absolutely. I will certainly do more palette knife work, and I'll take my own advice into account at some point. But I will always be a brush artist, I think. That is my first love, and classical art being one of those. Classical and impressionist art, I think, will always be my first love. But this was great, and thank you so much for joining me. I'm very sorry once again that I couldn't bring you the footage, but gremlins crawled in and there's nothing I can do about it. So artists, thank you very much for joining me in day 83, and I hope to see you in day 84. Please will you like and share and subscribe, folks. Don't forget to keep sharing. It's the big thing. And I will see you tomorrow. Thanks again for joining me. Bye-bye.
That's what you want to do.